In that space, I was outside the body in a luminous presence. It wasn't necessarily a being, but it was a luminous presence that was sort of enveloping me and cradling me in this cloud of like love and care. There wasn't a lot of joy in my life, and I was shown that each soul, including my soul, was here for the bliss of its own existence.
The one thing, though, that you will take with you, and that's forever yours, and that you will leave on this planet, is your legacy of love. The kind words, the compassion, the generosity. That ripples up for infinity.
Chrystal Rae, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so glad to be here. Nice to see you, Lily.
For everyone listening, Chrystal Rae is an artist, yoga teacher, owner of Gaia Flow Yoga with multiple locations throughout Texas, and author of the book Love Letters to Your Soul. So before we get into the near-death experience, can you tell me what was your life like before it?
So I have to put this into context, Lily, because I had a very spiritually transformative experience when I was a kid, like maybe between 10 and 13 years old. And that's a story that I want to talk about. But I came from a dysfunctional, functional family that I call. My mom was basically an alcoholic and my dad was absent. So it was a very tough childhood. It was a really challenging childhood. Typically in those kinds of situations, the child will have to grow up really quickly and become the adult. And that was the case for me, is I was sort of the only adult in the house, you know. And so my mom had a second marriage, and there was 3 of us from the first marriage, and then there was a baby girl from the second marriage who basically I raised like my own. Like I changed her diapers for 10 years of her life, first 10 years. But during that time, you know, it was really hard for me as a child. I always felt unworthy. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like I always had to please. And it was just a constant stress just to keep it all together. So at about between 11 and 13, you know, my mom would have these bouts where she would drink and then she would wake up in a very bad mood. I guess that's called being hungover. And so one morning she came over to my room. I heard her kind of thundering down the hall. And there was 3 of us, and we never knew who was going to be in trouble for whatever reason. But this particular morning, it was me. And so she pulled me by the hair down the hall and took me to the kitchen. And she pointed to this black spot up on the ceiling, and she said, "Why haven't you cleaned it?" And I mean, truly, with all my other little girl chores, it was a lot to raise my little sister. I was going to school. I was cleaning the house. I was picking up after her. And so I didn't even argue that I was just tired and I had too much to do. I just said, okay, I'll clean it. And I remember it was like this morning where the sun was kind of coming through the window, and it was kind of at an angle, and the light was kind of hazy. It's like a hazy light in the room. It was really kind of just heavy, felt like a oppressive kind of light. It was very, very weird. And I remember just being so sad and so tired. Like I was so young and I was just so tired. I was exhausted. And so I started having a conversation with God. And I didn't really have a context for God because I would joke that in our household, God was only welcome if he was damned. So, but I had heard, of course, the stories of Jesus and hell, and it was quite frightening, you know, for someone who felt like they weren't good enough. Because I felt like, you know, and even my mom would say, if you're a bad little girl, you're going to hell. And, you know, for me, hell was like, at that time, it was like snake and fire and the devil and gnashing of teeth and that kind of thing. It was kind of horrifying. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking about this concept. And again, I was really young, but I was thinking like, you know, you have to be good so you can get accolades and go to heaven, or you're going to be punished and you're going to go to hell. And it just seemed so corrupt to me. The whole thing seemed corrupt. Like trying to earn your way to heaven when you're given a particular set of predispositions, intellect, body size, family, you know, adding on all the factors, and you're not giving the proper emotional integrity to make correct choices under those circumstances, then I felt like it was kind of not fair. And then also the idea that a loving creator could create something that was flawed and then punish it for all of eternity, not just for a little time, all of eternity, for a speck of, or a dot in time, which would be a human life, 89, 100 years, nothing within the span of eternity. So it seemed to me that the math was also off. Like eternity should affect the small dot and not the reverse. But these were all thoughts that I had in very elementary sense, wasn't as sophisticated as they are now. But I just remember feeling like this unjust God and fearful God. And I did not feel connected to God. But I started having this conversation as I was cleaning the ceiling. I was saying, God, if it's true that, Moses could part the Red Seas, because I've seen that show too, like where they part the Red Seas. I said, why can't miracles happen now? Why did it only happen in biblical times? And I also thought, and if you're real, you could do me a couple of favors so that I would know you're real. First of all, I asked God if I could know that he was real, but not after I died, but before I died, because it felt like cheating to, you are real after all. I was like, why can't I, like Moses, know that you are real? And also, if you could help my mom stop drinking, then I'd really believe there was a God. And so these were the things I was thinking about. I continued with this thought torment, thinking, I don't want to be good to get to heaven or to stay out of hell. I want to be a good person. And that was like, oh my gosh, that means that I am a good person. It was like my first true sense of self-worthiness. I felt like I am actually a good person. And it was like, like the, sun burst through the clouds. It was just this really radiant, beautiful awakening that I just wanted to be good, not to get to heaven, not to avoid hell, but because I was a good person. And with that thought, I turned around and I literally walked off this counter. And so what happens when you walk off of a counter, just as when you step into an empty swimming pool, is that the physics of it is that your head goes down. And so my head started hurling towards the ground. It was probably about 5-foot counter. And all of a sudden, there was this expression of me, or 3 expressions of me. There was the physical body falling. There was the entity, which we might call the soul entity, that lived within the body, which is what I mostly related to. And then there was this all-knowing, all-encompassing experience of me that was the all-knowing observer. And the best way that I can make this analogy is that about a drop of water in the ocean. So that would be your body. And the wave would be the soul. And the ocean itself would be the all-knowing observer, or the essence of all that is. But they're all the same thing. So, but I related with the wave, or the soul entity. And I saw myself hurling into this tornado, which was like a tornado of time and space with no wind, but it was just this whirling thing. And I couldn't be sure if I was actually moving up or falling down, but I was kind of in a fetus position, just watching myself watching my physical body fall. And suddenly I felt like I came to a serene place in a beautiful dark night, like velvetly dark night, with punctuations of light in the distance. And there was this presence that was kind of, it wasn't even really telepathic. It was like answering all my questions before I asked them, kind of thing, but it was more like a download. So this presence told me, or communicated to me in whatever way that is, that this is time and space, and there's no empty space in the universe. I remember being told that. No empty space in the universe. This is time and space, and there's no empty space. And those stars, or those lights, are stars, and that's what you are. Pure energy. And then boom, I was back in my body. But somehow, like a cat, I had landed on my feet, and I was standing looking at the floor, and I was just like, what just happened? Because you try to rationalize when something miraculous like this happens, like Moses trying to rationalize, how did the waters part? It was that kind of feeling like, what just happened? So I tried to rationalize. I remember thinking, well, I must have fallen, hit my head, had this really cool dream, and I must have a big bruise. I probably have a concussion. I have, bleeding. I ran to the bathroom, and I was looking for a bruise, looking for something. Nothing. I was fine. So I called my brother, and I was like, Mark, God saved me. And he was like, what? Because again, in our house, God was not really welcome. And I said, no, there was three of me, and I fell out of my body, and there was, it's like, there was the body, and there was this essence that lives within the body, and then there was an all-knowing, dispassionate, by the way, observer. This all-knowing observer did not buy into my poor little crystal story. So there was three of me: the all-knowing observer, the body, and the soul essence. The all-knowing observer, if you want to think about it, was again the ocean. And it had a bigger context for me than the soul entity that was really related to my, or not related, but identified with my personality self in this lifetime, and maybe many lives, but let's just say this lifetime. So this all-knowing observer knew there was a bigger context to me than the little poor, because I had at that time a pretty good victim story going on, with good reason, by the way.
Yeah.
Because I had bald spots and bruises, and I had verbal abuse, and I had a pretty good story going, and I had to hide all of this from people, because if anyone ever found out, then it would probably be worse for me, because then they would try to get the CPA involved and all this stuff, which is like the child protection services. At one time, one of the neighbors did this, and it turned out that we all got in big trouble for that, for exposing them, my parents. So anyway, the story I had, was poor, pitiful me. But when I was in this space, what I realized is that each soul is here for the bliss of its own existence, and that this was something that my soul had longed for, to have these challenges, because I am, a strong and fierce, radiant energy that wanted to do a lot in this lifetime. And so I said, I'm sure in that soul realm, like the pre-life realm, I'm pretty sure that I said, just bring it on, bring on all this stuff. And many times I believe we come in as bodhisattvas as well, meaning that you come in to be the healing force within a certain community, family, culture, or as a sacrificial lamb. And I'll talk more about that later. But anyway, so they weren't buying the omnipresent observer, who was also me, wasn't buying my story, because it knew a bigger context. In other words, if you ask for something and then you get it, then why are you feeling like a victim? You wanted this, you asked for it, and I gave it to you. Here you go. And now you're mad at me. So anyway, fast forward, my brother's like, you've lost your mind, you need a straitjacket. And we all started laughing. And then at the end of that, I remember telling him, I said, just please never forget that I told you this, because I don't want sometime in the future to think that this was a dream or a fantasy. I want to always remember this, because it's very poignant for my life, and I really want to remember it. It changed me. So you talk about who I was before the near-death experience. This is really when the change happened. And I think the change actually started when I decided that I didn't care to be good to get to heaven, that I didn't care to be good to not get into hell, that I truly wanted to be good because I'm a good person. And that was the spark that set everything into motion. And just that innocent little prayer, God, please show me that you're real before I die. It was instantly manifest. 1 second later, I'm falling off of a counter, heading towards the ground. So I did not die, by the way. I had an out of body experience, because the prayer or the request was, I want to know before I die. So then after that, fast forward, my brother is my witness, by the way, to this day. He's like, yeah, you told me. But it changed me. I started reading the Bible. I read the Bible 7 times through. At 11, 12, 13 years old, that's a lot, especially since nobody in my house even, read the Bible. And so I read it through, and the stories actually scared the holy bejesus out of me, because I was like, what is going to happen with this, end of times business and all these people being left behind? So I started going to Sunday school, and I would call buses. My mom had thought I'd lost my mind completely. And I was baptized 5 times because I didn't feel it. because they would like, you're born again, you come out of the water, you're supposed to feel like this new, sinless, pure. And I really did not really. I came out and I felt like, well, I'm still me. And I didn't feel that loving presence that I told you about when I was in that suspended state, that was all encompassing, that had no judgment, good or bad, about me, that was giving me complete liberty to live my life and make my choices and love me unconditionally. And there was no way that I needed to earn this love or that I could lose this love. And so that was the expression of love I was looking for. And I never found it. That I'd walk to Sunday school, I'd call buses, I went to Pentecostal, I went to all kinds of different churches to look for this experience. But meanwhile, I'm growing up, and I'm a young woman, I'm a teenager, the rebellious, all of that was coming up. And I was just trying to keep it together because there's a lot of emotional energy that happens for young women, when you become a woman and you have all these hormones going, and, that teenage years are hard. But meanwhile, I was just trying to tiptoe over my drunken mother to get to school so I wouldn't, like it was a hard time. So eventually I got to the place where I felt like if I don't leave this environment, something really pure and innocent inside of me is going to die. And I was super sad about leaving because I had my baby sister who was at the time 10 years old. And so it would be, I knew if I left that I would be leaving her, kind of like leaving her to the wolves, because I was kind of her everything. But I also knew that I had to get out of there because part of me was being crushed, and like a horse getting the life kind of like tamed out of it or whatever. So I left home at 17 years old, which, by the way, I know I never recommend anybody leaving home because it turned out okay for me, but I'm just going to say it's not easy when you're a single, you're alone, you're on the street, and you're trying to make it. There's a lot of wolves out there. So I always like just to say that because I don't think it's a solution. I think it was something I was forced into, but it was not a solution for my life, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was really, really, really hard time. But I made it through. I was modeling and I was working. And I remember I called my mom the day after I left. And she was like, if you don't come home now, you don't exist. I never want to see you again. And it was just heartbreaking to me. She said, you're going to be a drug addict. You're going to be a loser. You're going to be a whore. You're going to be a prostitute. You're going to be on the street. You're going to be, blah, blah, blah. And that made me mad.
Yeah.
And it was probably the best pep talk you could have given me at the time because I had that rebellious energy. So I was like, I'll show you. I made straight A's, and I bought my first car, I had my own apartment. I did make mistakes, but I never did anything that typical teenagers do. I worked, I went to school, I made straight A's, I graduated, top of the class, and I made my own money, and all the stuff. And so my life went on. I forgot about all the spiritual stuff, or the religious stuff, I should say, after I had one last experience, and I think it was probably right before I left home, where I went to one of those charismatic healers, that they kind of like put their hand on you and you fall back, that kind of thing. So I went because I was kept looking for this light that I had seen as a little girl, and he did put his hand on me. I did fall back, but I immediately knew that this is hypnotism and it wasn't coming from a good place. I intuitively knew that. And I as soon as I got off the ground, I said, that is not cool what you guys are doing. That is not love. It's hypnotism, and you're using your pranics, your psychic energy in a negative way. And they kind of escorted me out to the back. So I was like, okay. I gave up on religion after that. I was like, okay, I'm done. No more religion. And I still was living a really beautiful life because I always wanted to be good, as I said. I met my first husband, and then we got married, had children, and he was from a big Latin family, which is what I wanted. I wanted family. I wanted a lot of children. And unfortunately, I was looking for a hero, and he was looking for someone to save, which worked out well until we had to get along. And he had a different cultural background than I did. As I said, he was Latin. And, he's like one of my best friends right now, but he wasn't a really good husband as far as we weren't compatible. in a lot of ways. It was just that we were really incompatible because he liked to drink and go out, and I don't like to drink. I never liked to drink. I never did drugs. I never wanted any of that. I just really wanted to have like a more holistic kind of life. And I think, in some ways it was kind of boring to be with me if you like a more party kind of life, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, I got divorced, and he was a really great ex-husband, like the best actually, and a really great dad, to the best of his ability. I guess we all make mistakes, but so I just moved on. About a year, it was heartbreaking for me, I have to admit, when I got divorced, because he was the love of my life, and I loved him like you would love, your own child kind of love, like just unconditionally. I would have done anything for him. So it was really heartbreaking. Plus, I felt like he had kind of unmasked me, like the imposter, like the little girl that wasn't worthy. He had discovered her, and that's why it wasn't working. That's why I wasn't enough for him or something. So I had those childhood traumas coming towards me as I went through this divorce. It just brought up all of my insecurities as a child. As I said, children in those kind of environments, they often feel not good enough and unworthy.
Yeah.
And so I made it through that divorce. I didn't date for a year and a half, but the first time I did, it was a nice gentleman that I had met, and he wanted me to go on the ski trip with him. And I was like, no, I'm not really ready to travel with a man or even have a relationship with a man. I had 2 children, but I did think, I'm just locked up all the time. I never go out. I should probably do something. I said, well, the only way I would come is if I had like a chaperone, if like my cousin could come with me. And he's like, yeah, my family's going to be there. He had older kids, and you can bring whoever you want. You have your own room, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, okay, I should do this. And so I did. But once I got there, I realized that, again, it's like, because I'm not the party type, his children, these old adult children, they like to drink and smoke and cuss. And I was like, what am I doing here? Like, this is not, doesn't feel comfortable to me. I don't really want to be here. So I thanked him, and my cousin was also ready to leave. And so I thanked him. And this is where we get into this horrendous car wreck. So I'll tell you about that. And I had a near-death experience. But so he was happy to take me to the airport. We were on our way to the airport, and we were really friendly about it. He was laughing about it. I was laughing about it. We were driving up this mountain road, heading to the airport, and the car started to spin. I was in the passenger seat. My cousin was in the back seat. It was a little red Jeep with a plastic cover. He was driving, and we started to spin. He lost control of the car, and we were circling on this little highway, and the car coming down the mountain could not stop, obviously, on the ice. Impact was on my side of the car, and then it hurled us off this cliff that was 25-foot direct fall, and then we tumbled like head over in 10 more times to 80 feet at the bottom of this cliff. And in that time and space of this, I had the most profound experience of my life, even more than when I was a child. I was suddenly outside of my body watching the whole, right when it started to spin and things started to slow down, like time became really, really slow or almost non-existent. And so it was like really slow moving. And in that space, I was outside the body in a luminous presence. It wasn't necessarily a being, but it was a luminous presence that was sort of enveloping me, in cradling me in this cloud of like love and care and comfort. And I remember looking and seeing myself like from a distance, and everyone in the car kind of frantic, and as if they were watching, like if there was 2 of me, there was a person going, ah, and then there was this person that was kind of dispassionately watching, like feeling only compassion for the people in the car, but not necessarily identifying with that. And in this space, like every single question that I had, even before I answered it, was kind of downloaded into me. It wasn't like a spoken word at all. It was like I knew why this was happening. I knew that it was part of my soul path to to have this based on my choices, that all my choices had led me here. And one of the most important choices I think that led me to this place was this ongoing grief or sadness that I had. So, we bring on a lot of sicknesses, or we attract accidents or horrible things to come to us because we have a certain vibrational energy. And I had this kind of ongoing grief about my life, about failed marriage, and my childhood, and some betrayals from friends who I really had trusted, and it was just like a cloud of like sadness, and all this being a good person, like I would be a good wife, a good daughter, a good ex-wife, good, good, but there wasn't a lot of joy in my life. And I was shown that each soul, including my soul, was here for the bliss of its own existence. And I had never known that. Like I thought I was here to be responsible, to, do the right thing, to, survive, always in survival mode. And I had no idea it was about joy. It was about bliss. And I was shown that it was about bliss. And then I was shown like three very poignant things in this whole conversation. First being that I was shown that I had never truly experienced the sun rising or setting, which was really fascinating because of course I had. But in that moment, it was almost like it was shown to me like the sun coming up over the horizon, and the glorious and metaphoric value of each and every day, and this visceral experience of just, and symbolic experience of like each breath where we're being born, and then the night comes and there's this respite and rest and refuge and comfort, and then we get to challenge ourselves again with the new day. And so I was shown this, that I had never seen the sunrise or the glory of the sunrise, or the absolute exquisite restfulness and gift of the night, the comfort of the dark night, the blanket of night. And then I was shown that I had never, and this is a funny one, I had never really smelled freshly cut grass, like when people are mowing the grass. And I was like overwhelmed by this beautiful aroma of freshly cut grass, which is just such an earthy smell. And I was shown like the beauty of being really on planet Earth, like the beauty of our planet, like of the earth, that earth. I think nothing resembles it more than just freshly cut grass. Much less had I smelled the roses, I definitely hadn't smelled the grass. And I was shown the visceral experience of being here, that we get to taste, we get to see, we get to smell, we get to experience, and that we're supported by Mother Earth, which, by the way, my yoga studios are called Gaia, and Gaia means Earth, and it's like Gaia is Mother Earth. So that's why I named my studio Gaia Flow Yoga, because it's an earth flow, and then we have flows that are called like mountain, desert, ocean, and those are based on this. And it's because of this near-death experience where I was shown this earthy smell of grass and the gift of Mother Earth, of our beautiful planet. And then finally, and probably most poignantly, as far as being human at least, I was shown that I had never really reached out and touched someone, like truly embraced them. Like most of the time when we embrace somebody, we have sort of a barrier. Like this is like, the little half pat or whatever, like, oh, nice to see you.
Side hug.
Yeah. But it's not, there's kind of, there's kind of a barrier where you don't really get to connect with that person. And so I was shown that I had never really connected. I mean, of course, I'd combed my children's hair, I had given birth, I've had relationships, but I was shown that when we embody a human body, we have this amazing ability that we don't have when we're just our light energy, which is to actually touch and feel and embrace and have this visceral experience of being united with another in an embodied way. I'm sure on the soul level, like the embodiment is like your energies fuse more than, but here it's this ability just to embrace somebody, like truly, embrace them with your physical being. So, and I was shown that, and I was really sad about all those three things. But then I was like, oh, well, it's too late for me. Because remember, this is all in slow time, right? But meanwhile, the car is falling off the cliff. It's flipping. you know, it's crashing into the wall, it's being smashed into, all this is happening while I'm having this really beautiful conversation. And then I was like, oh well, I guess it's too late for me, is what I thought. Because you know, you never, and I remember thinking, I didn't know I was going to die today. Like I was like, what? I didn't know I was going to die today. Like I guess we think we're immortal on some level, like unconsciously. Because I was a young woman and I didn't know I was going to die. And I remember having this deep remorse in that moment when I thought about this. Oh, I didn't know I was going to die. And I was like, what about my children? They're going to be orphans, which of course not, they had a dad, but I mean, without their mom, they're going to be orphans. And immediately when I had that question, I was shown that, again, each soul's here for the bliss of its own experience, including your children, and they'll be fine without you, which is kind of shocking, right? Because as a mother, you always think like you're the pinnacle for their journey. You're the one that's, you know, guiding them, taking care of them, and without you, they would not be okay. But the truth of it is, at least as what I experienced, is that I was shown that my children had many timelines available to them, just as I did. There's nothing set in life, everything is always in flux. But one of the timelines that I was shown was that I was shown them at my funeral. I saw my kids at my funeral, and they were crying and sad, but then I also saw their lives fast forward, and I saw them both getting married and being happy and having children without me. And I saw the whole timeline, and it's kind of hard to believe how much information was downloaded simultaneously while I was falling off this cliff in the however many seconds it took to get from the top to the bottom of an 80-foot cliff. But I was shown that, and I shown that they would be just fine. And I was like, oh, I was kind of shocked, but I was relieved. And then I was also shown that I also had various timelines available. But before I talk about the timelines, I was shown my life, panoramic life review, meaning that I saw every single and all instantaneously, again, in like the eternal now moment where there is no past or future, everything is stacked upon itself and everything happens simultaneously. And I was shown every kind and unkind act, word, action, deed that I had done in my life. And I was shown like on a panoramic view where I saw everything from 3 dimensions. Like I would see myself walking forward, but I would also see what I was left behind and what was to the side of me. And I saw if I said something kind or unkind, how it would ripple out and hurt the other person, but not only them, it would ripple out and hurt whoever was in contact with them and their children and so on, all the way to infinity. Like what our actions never stop. Like what we do is so important. The kind acts, the unkind acts. And there was no judgment except for the judgment we bring upon ourselves. There was just compassion while I was being shown the less than kind moments of my life. I was held in absolute, cradled in absolute compassion and almost like comforted, like kind of shown that we're all doing the best that we can in each moment. So there is no real judgment, because if that's, the proof is that you didn't do any better. It's not that there's not something better available, it's that at this particular energetic frequency, it's not available to you. And that's why you don't do better. And every little choice that we make that takes us in a more positive direction or more loving direction, like the smallest little act of kindness, shifts trajectories where you can eventually. And I think people always think that these big, like, crossroads are so important, which they are. But here's what's the caveat to that is that you only have certain crossroads available because of all of those intricate little everyday choices that you make to be kind or to be unkind, and they ripple out. And so the most insignificant things that you can think of, like, didn't really matter. You opened the door for an old woman, you let someone in on the freeway, you forgave someone who didn't really deserve your forgiveness, you forgave them because you're a kind and loving person. Whatever it is, I was shown that there was a couple of times in my life when I had been really benevolent to others and given of myself without any reciprocation needed. Like I was just going to help someone because I could. And many times even these people that I helped betrayed me in the end. But I still wished them well. You know, I I'm not the kind of person to hold a grudge. I just can't. I cannot hate. I do have strong boundaries. I want to say that. Like I have, especially as I've grown into my power, learned to have really strong boundaries. And when people show me who they are, I believe them. I'm not saying that they're stuck there forever, but I believe them in that moment. And it's not my job to change anyone. It's my job to take care of myself and create an environment that allows me to evolve and to be a force of good. So I was shown all this stuff, right? And I was shown that my life, and I'll talk about timelines, that my life, I had various timelines just as my children did. And one of those timelines would be that I would exit the planet in this moment. Like, in other words, I would die in this car wreck. And I was shown everything that would happen as a result of me dying. How it would not only impact my children and their children, but it would impact the entire universe. I know it's hard to believe you get all this downloaded, but how things would be so very different if one thing was different, and like one fly didn't exist, the entire universe might be different, that kind of thing, one grain of sand. And so then I was shown, like, I had multiple timelines based on my energetic presence currently at that time. There was these timelines that were the most closely aligned with my energy choices at that time. Again, I could have died. I could have, there were so many I was shown that I can't even tell you. I could have come back with some disabilities. The one that really excited me, though, was the one we talked about at the very beginning, was to come back and to write this book and tell the world that love is all that matters. So this presence conveyed to me, oh, you're going to come back and write this book and tell the world that love is all that matters. And I was like, oh, that sounds exciting. Like, that's so exciting. Like, I'm going to write a book. That's exciting. Like, I was really excited about it. And then he said, yes, and you're going to put in the book, and I say he, it was androgynous. It wasn't a he, but I just say he. But, and you're going to put in the book that sound and light are the future of medicine. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to write a book. And so that's the book that I was telling you about, Love Letters to Your Soul. It's just out. So super excited about it. It took me 20 years to write it, but that's the timeline that I chose. So go back to the car wreck. We're at the bottom of this cliff. We slammed into a huge wall of ice, and the Jeep is upside down. The wheels are spinning. The headlights are, off into the distance. And, when I said, oh, well, I guess I'm going to die, I didn't know I was going to die. And then I guess we started tumbling. And my last thought, conscious thought, was, I guess I'm going into the light, because I expected those lights that I had seen as a child, the stars, that's what we are.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I guess I'm going into the light. And then I lost consciousness. I don't remember what happened. But I woke up at the bottom of this cliff, kind of like in the Jeep. I was down where the feet, where your feet are supposed to be. I was all curled up down by the feet. And luckily, because my seat was completely crushed, like the door was crushed in. And the driver, he said he was fine, but he was covered in blood. And then I couldn't find my cousin Carmen. I climbed out of this Jeep. I, climbed up this mountain, 80-foot cliff. I got to the top, and this is when things started getting really groovy, I guess, a good way to put it, because I started to feel everyone's feelings and know their thoughts, which was really terrifying because there's so much fear and anger alive and within the human consciousness. I saw this movie where this man with rubber boots was going to steal my purse, and I was kind of hysterical about it. I was like, somebody get my purse, because I had my tickets and my wallet, and I had bought this bag of books that I love to read. I had bought this bag of spiritual books I was all excited about. My books, I was really getting my books too. But anyway, this man in rubber boots, which I imagine was probably a firefighter, stole and actually it was stolen. It was not in the car. And so then somehow I got to the hospital, and I don't remember. Again, I was probably in shock, but I do remember walking into the hospital, and there was this male nurse there, and he was really angry. And I could feel all this people's feeling. And he was yelling at us that we had been drinking, and that my cousin Carmen, who was unconscious, they had to pull her up on a stretcher, care flight her, that she was going to die, and that we were going to go to jail for manslaughter. And I was like, what are you talking about? I don't even drink. What are you talking about? The driver, he had like 2 drinks of whatever, but he was not drinking. This was not a drinking situation at all. And so he grabbed my my arm, and when he did, I saw him the night before. I saw like a panoramic view of him hitting or beating his wife or girlfriend or whoever this woman was. And I felt his anger and his wrath towards her, but I also felt her fear and her desperation and her sorrow. And I felt it all simultaneously again. And I didn't even know who this man was, but it was like way too much information for me. And I just kind of ripped my arm off, and I ran into where Carmen was, which was on the gurney inside the emergency room. And I remember I just put my hand on her leg. And when I did, I felt like a bolt of energy come through the crown of my head, go through my body, come out my arms, and kind of ripple through Carmen. And I literally saw her body just ripple. And I was like, oh, she's going to be okay. And I just knew she'd be okay. And so then I that same nurse came and grabbed me, and I was like, let me go. And I ran to the bathroom. I was still in shock because, this is a lot of information coming in. I was seeing lights around people, like auras, which I didn't even know what that was at the time. Feeling people's thoughts, all this fear. Plus, I had just been through this very traumatic car wreck, and I had just been in this amazing light. Like, I was like, felt like it was all so dreamy. Like, what is going on? So I was just curled up in the bathroom in a corner. Like, I did not want to see anyone. This nice nurse, she came in. She was like, we need to take x-rays of your neck. We need to, check you out. So can you please come with me? And I said, yes, I'll come, as long as that male nurse was not there. So I went, and they took x-rays of my neck. Because my neck I couldn't turn my neck. I was like, So when they took x-rays of my neck, they said, the doctor came back and said, unfortunately, we have bad news for you. Apparently, you've got a break in your neck, a fracture or something. And I was like, oh no, that's not on my timeline. Because remember, I'm supposed to come back and write a book and tell the world that love that matters. So I put my hand like on my neck, and I felt that same heat. But it was almost as though my hand was on fire and it was glued to my neck. I said, you need to take another x-ray because my neck is fine. That's not my timeline. Like, I am not supposed to have a broken neck. But here's the thing, broken neck was close to the timeline of writing book because of my energetics, that energetic field. So if I had shifted just slightly, I could have ended up with broken neck, if that makes sense, to like a different energy. I mean, I don't want to say positive or negative, but just a different energy. But I immediately reset. I was like, that's not my timeline. I was like, take it. So they took 3 more x-rays. Second x-ray, no break. Third x-ray, no break. Fourth x-ray, they said, okay, we'll let you go, but you have to sign away your rights. We're not responsible. We don't know what's going on with these x-rays because there's clearly a break. Like, nobody could explain it. And I'm like, that's fine. My big goal was to get home to my children. Because again, I was shown I had never really touched anyone. I had never really seen the sunrise. I had never really embraced. And I wanted to, and that I had just been this be good person, but only to be good because, I was supposed to be good, but not for goodness sake. And now I understood that I get to be good. I don't have to be good. And that whole backpack of like, you're here to be good went away. And the gift of you get to be good was available, and you get to have this life, you get to be alive, you get to be on planet Earth, and it all seemed like such a blessing. So I couldn't wait to see my children, and so I wanted to leave. I did. I made it back to my normal life, but there was nothing normal about me, especially right after the accident, because as I said, I couldn't talk to someone without knowing what they were thinking. And a lot of times those thoughts are not kind. There's a lot of fear, and little movies of their life would play out, like poignant things that happened to them as a child, or, future events, even what would happen to them in the future. And it was just all so much. It was like a door open. And I didn't ask for that door to be open. So it was a little disconcerting. So I came home, I just kind of closed my curtains. And another thing that happened that's weird, and I found out later happens for a lot of people who've had near-death experiences, is that I couldn't really be in the light. Like the light really hurt my eyes. And loud noises were really bothersome to me. And that had actually happened since I was a little kid, and I fell off the counter. But it was really amplified after this accident. Like I just wanted to be, couldn't take the light or loud noises. I had to have, my central nervous system was kind of like radiating or something. And so I needed to be in very calm, peaceful, earthy kind of places. But eventually I went to see Carmen about 2 weeks out because I wanted to see her, because she was the one that had the biggest impact physically from the car wreck. She broke every bone in her face, like every bone, including her eye sockets. And she was still in the recovery hospital. She was in coma. So I wanted to go and visit her. And I remember walking in, and her mother was there, the nurses were there, her doctor was there. And I remember her mother being so angry at me, just like sending like arrows of anger at me, because I was the one who invited her daughter on this trip. And now her daughter was so, so her life would never be the same. And so she was projecting all that anger onto me as though, I had caused the car wreck or something, I wasn't even driving. But anyway, I guess, we sometimes project onto people when we have something like that happen. It's hard to not project, or even onto God sometimes, that angry at God for this happening. But anyway, I went in and I saw Carmen, which was really scary. And here's the funny thing, Lily, she kind of looked like you, but older. And she had like dark hair, but she had these big eyes and this doe skin. She was just beautiful, beautiful woman. She was a clarinetist for the Dallas Opera. And she was brilliant. She had a super high IQ, and she was just a brilliant musician. And so I came into the room, and I saw her mother and her doctors and nurses. I had all this anger being projected onto me, which is understandable based on what happened, even though I wasn't the cause of it. Her mother, was not happy to see me. And Carmen she scared me because she broke every bone in her face, including her eye sockets, and her teeth were like hanging on by rubber bands. Like I said, I put rubber bands in her teeth, which I'd never seen that before. And so it was kind of scary, truthfully. And then I just remember I calmed myself down. I took a couple of deep breaths and I said, "This is your cousin Carmen, and you love her." And then I just saw Carmen. I didn't see this mangled body. I just saw Carmen. So I walked up to her and I put my hand on her. And when I did, to everyone's surprise, including me, she opened her eyes and she sat up and she said she wanted to talk to me. And like everybody was like freaking out, including her doctor. Like she wanted to get out of bed and come talk to us. She had her little IV. And so she was walking over to me and she told me, "Chrystal, I'm in the light. I've never been so radiant. I'm gleaming. I'm a star." And that went all the way back to my childhood. Yeah. That's why I always like to talk about that event happening, that miraculous event happening as a child, because even as an adult, the universe is so beautiful and so loving that it gave me yet another confirmation that there is a divinity at work in our lives that's far more intelligent than most give credit to. And I knew exactly what she was talking about because I had been there in that space. And I knew that we are light energy. We are the manifestation of light embodied into a physical being. But anyway, her parents, her mom was like, "Oh, brain damage." When she said I'm a star, they were like, "Oh, brain damage." And, they had predicted she'd have 90% brain damage, never be able to walk, or she'd never defeat herself again, and this and that. So then she went back to the bed, and she immediately went back into coma, which also freaked everybody out. Because typically you come out of coma, you're out of coma. But she went back into coma. And then every time I would come for the next couple of days, like I would touch her and she would sit up and talk to me. They'd come out of coma. And one time she told me, "There's 3 radiant beings, like balls of light, and they've been with me for all of time and space since I was a little girl, and before this life and into the future. Like these are my guardians, and they told me that everything's going to be okay and not to worry, and that they wouldn't leave my side, that they were here with me, that this was a journey that I had chosen, and it's going to be hard, but it's going to be really good for my soul." And so she told me all these beautiful things. And the next time I came, she sat up again and she told me, "Oh, and don't forget, you're going to write a book and tell the world that love is all that matters." I know, right? And don't forget to put in that book that sound and light is the future of medicine.
And then, boom, she went back to sleep. But meanwhile, her mother was not happy about me coming to visit because I think it scared her. She was really Catholic, and I think she was like thinking it was some kind of weird poltergeist thing going on or something. She didn't know that it was just our soul connection between Carmen and me. And so, by the way, I wanted to just mention that Carmen, because I get these questions all the time. What happened to Carmen?
Yeah.
Carmen had 18 operations on her face. She never was the exquisite beauty that she was pre-accident, but she really, the surgeons did a really, really good job. Like, she looks so natural, like her face. She was supposed to have brain damage, which she did not have. She had a memory loss of 10 years, married to 2 alcoholic husbands. That's not bad. And then her IQ was increased, and her musical abilities was increased. So she became the lead clarinetist. And then she met the love of her life, which she's still married. They have a real estate company together. She retired, and she's living a very happy life. So I lost contact with her because her mom uninvited me to visit. So for many years, only as of recently did I reconnect with Carmen because I wanted to find out some details because I was ready to share my story. And at that moment, I was in such shock when it happened that I didn't remember the day, or many of the details are kind of blurred. So I connected with her because I figured she would have medical records and documents. And so I think it was February 23rd, 1997 when this happened. And I didn't even know that. That was the anniversary of it. So anyway, I lost contact with her. I continued my life with this mission. You know, I thought, well, if I'm going to write a book and tell the world that love is all that matters, then I need to, go to college. Because when I was younger, as I told you, my goal in life was to get married and have children and have a family, because family was so important to me. And so I didn't, I either was going to get married, or I was going to move to Mexico, which is what I did, or go to college, or I was going to sign a modeling agency in New York. So all of these opportunities were happening at the same time. And I decided that what really mattered to me was love. And I really loved this man. So I was going to go to Mexico and be his wife and have his children. So anyway, fast forward, post-accident, I remember calling my ex-husband and saying, I want to go to college. He was on the board of this college here. And so I said, hey, I want to go back to school. And literally I was driving by, and my son, who was probably about 10 at the time, he was like, Mom, and he's pull over, you need to go find out. You want to go to school? Let's go, let's get you. And by coincidence, on that day was registration.
Wow. Perfect.
Hello. And then I called my former husband, and he called the dean because he was on the board. And the next day, literally, I was sitting in class. And the first thing they said is, I remember these words because, again, the universe is always confirming what we know to be true, so that we can, and we always put it like, oh, that's just coincidence. But the first thing that the professor said in my very first class, this was Frederick Turner, an amazing teacher, and he said, they've just discovered that there's no empty space in the universe. And I was like, I knew that, like, since I was a child. There's this thing called dark matter, and that was when dark matter had been discovered. And so I decided I would take some writing classes if I was going to write a book. And I did really well in college. I was a non-degree seeking student, but all of my teachers I was like in my 30s at the time, maybe 35 or something. And my teachers were like, Chrystal, you should just get your degree. And I was like, yeah, but that wouldn't include math. And math was my nemesis. And so they were like, just take some elementary math, you'll do fine. So I took a couple of elementary math classes, and then I took as few math classes as I could. And I think I got 1 B in college, which was, I call it sadistics instead of statistics. That was my B in college. But school was easy for me. It seemed like all of my senses had been heightened, and they'd always been easy since I was a kid, except for math. And I found out I'm dyslexic, and that's probably one of the reasons that math was so difficult, because back in my day, dyslexia wasn't really diagnosed. That's like a common thing now that they look for. But in my day, it was just like you were flipping numbers. Like you would see a 6 as a 9 or a 3 as an 8, or you wouldn't. And as to this day, even when I write my writing, I have to listen to like the computer read back. Otherwise, my brain will insert words that are not there, like in and it. My brain just sees them, but they're not there. But I can hear it. So anyway, I went through college. I wrote one book while I was in college, and that was kind of a very cathartic book. It was more about healing my childhood than anything else, because I wrote it from the aspect of a little girl going through this really hard time and all the emotional things. Like, there's a lot of tears as I was writing this book. And then I reflected back from a woman in her 30s, mid-30s, 40s, and the benefit that those experiences had. And it was really a quite dark book, but very healing for me. But this is why I didn't publish that book, because I thought that was the book, but actually it was not the book. I went to this thing in Dallas. It's called the Cosmic Cup. And they had the last living Sufi saint there. And I was excited to see this guy because he could stop his heart for 45 minutes. No brain waves, no heart, nothing. And I was like, anyone that can do that is worthy of my attention. And they had done all kinds of studies on him at Harvard and Stanford, on Yale, all these Ivy League schools where he had gone. He was able to like literally just be out of his body completely, no functions and come back. And so I was like, I want to go see this guy. So everybody was there crowded into the room to see this last living Sufi saint. And he had the big turban on his head, dressed in white, and there was incense, and there was a bunch of people in there. And, I told you I don't like crowds and I don't like bright lights. And so when I went in, it was like this small room, and there was a lot of people in there. So I was like, I'm just going to stay back here in the back. I'm not going to crush myself in there just to be close to the living saint. I just kind of wanted to see what he had to say. But to my surprise, he goes, you, and he points to me, come here. And I'm like, what? Me? And so he's like, yeah, you come here. So I went up, and he was like, whispered in my ear. He said, don't tell anyone about your childhood until you're famous. And I'm like, ooh, cool, I'm going to be famous. But I had just written that book, and that book was all about my childhood.
Yeah.
And so I took that as a message that I should put the book away, which I did. I didn't publish it. And I just continued on. And I did realize that, that this book was supposed to be the book that I wrote. It's really a book that is the book I couldn't find when I was going through my healing of my own dark night of the soul. So this accident actually happened over 20 years ago, like 1997. From that time forward, I had to do a lot of healing, a lot of self-work, a lot of healing of my childhood, my relationships. And the soul is always growing. And I wanted to be at a place when I wrote this book where I could embody that kind of loving beingness. And it's taken me some time to get there, but I think I'm at the space where I feel proud to represent the book and be that embodiment. So the way that energy is moving through me, let's say the presence of the divine moving through me, and the way that I speak about love is as though I'm a conduit of the divine, and I'm speaking directly to your soul so that you will know that you're not alone, you're not abandoned, that love is real, and that you're going to be okay. When I asked as a child could I know, just like Moses, that the waters were parted, I think my presence and the message that I have to share uniquely as Chrystal Rae, because this is not a new message, but it's a new message through my voice, is that I'm able to look into anyone's eyes, and even if they are a lower vibration, let's say not a nice person, and say, I love you, the real you, the essence of God that is you, the God source in you, is in you, beyond all the shadows that you have wrapped around you. And I have that ability to do that, to be able to say that. Now, does that mean that I allow people to treat me wrong or into my space when their energetic field is not coherent with mine? let's say, just to say it, and the answer is no. But it doesn't mean, for example, I'm now going through, and I shared this with you, that I'm going through a separation and divorce because my husband, I found out, was not who I thought he was. Let's just put it that way. And so it's like I can't stay in a relationship with someone who is not honest, who's cheating, who's lying, and it's a very hard thing because I still love him. I love him, but I am not going to stay in a space. And I realize that because it's at this point in my life where I'm liberating myself to be the one, the spokesperson for love, I am the spokesperson that I've been challenged that can you, even when someone betrays you, even when someone hurts you and somebody really crushes you even, can you still love? And the answer is yes. Is it easy? No. It's not easy, but it's good. Good. So my message is really one of unconditional love. And the first person to love is to love yourself and to take really good care of yourself so that you can love others. Because if you don't, you can't love anyone. You can't give what you don't have. And so I'm ready now just to share this message. It was such a divine encounter with this presence that I always feel with me, by the way. I've always felt it since I was a little girl, but I feel it even more now as I'm coming into the space of like a mature space spiritually, let's say, for my existence in this lifetime, a mature space where I can actually be of service to many. And one of the things that I really love to do is to mentor and to help others, and especially, young people. I say young people, I mean like 20s, 30s, 40s, because I'm in my 60s now. So, but I mean, I have a lot of students that I mentor and young women, young men, and it's been a real pleasure for me just to be part of other people's success. I think nothing makes me happier than to see people, because I know in my own life, I've had what I call like angels, guardians, both seen and unseen. For example, when I was going through my divorce of my children's father, I was in such a dark space because I had all those childhood, energies coming back up. And I remember I went to the gym and I was just working out like crazy because it was just a good way to move energy. And I didn't really have any other way to do that at that time as I do now. But at that time, I really didn't. And I remember this woman, sweet woman, she walked up to me and she was like, "So hi, Chrystal, how are you today?" And I was like, one of those times when I actually thought, like, how am I? And I was like, well, would you like to know? And I was like, I'm getting a divorce. I'm heartbroken. I don't have any family here. I'm so afraid. I don't know how I'm going to be able to raise my children. And I just started bursting into tears. And she, this is in the gym, okay? She just kind of took a step back. People are looking at me. I'm bawling. And then here's what I said. She's like an angel for me, because after she took back, she kind of opened her heart and she stood a step toward me. And she said something that changed my life that I always like to share. She said that divine order is always at work in your life and all is well. And she hugged me. And I went home really, and I wrote that on my bathroom mirror. Divine order is always at work in your life. And it's been a really wonderful mantra for me, grounding me that when things are chaotic and you can't understand why things are happening or how, a lot of times I'll ask my students, like, who has not experienced the dark night of the soul? And there'll be a few like youngins that are like, I haven't. I'm like, well, don't worry, because it's coming. It's coming. And they were like, oh, okay, because we will all have losses in our life. And anything that you love, you will lose. And you will feel this, pain and sorrow, but there is a gift to it, right? So that's why you're ready for this, by you acknowledge in the practice of non-attachment, which means that nothing really belongs to you, but you get to enjoy it in this moment. Even your own body, you will have to give up one day. And so the one thing, though, that you will take with you, and that's forever yours, and that you will leave on this planet, is your legacy of love. The kind words, the compassion, the generosity, that ripples out for infinitum. And the love that you've received from others, you get to take that with you. And so like the most important thing that we can do in our life is, and this is my secret sauce, I guess, and it's just to ask myself in every situation, and it's sometimes really hard, what is my most loving response to this person, to this place, to this circumstance? And here's the thing, this is not a willy-nilly kind of love. This is like you have to be fierce love, because sometimes the kindest thing is going to be very harsh, like to walk away, to leave, to not accept, to say no, to honor yourself, to leave everything behind, to start over again and again, and to let your heart be broken 1,000 times every day so that you can love more fully. And that's basically my story.
That is beautiful. I resonate with many things that you're saying. And I would like to go to part 2 so I can ask you some more questions related to your story. Would you be good with going with me to part 2?
Let's do it.
This little guy.
Oh, so cute.